Hello, welcome to LinMot Tutorials. At this point, you should have LinMot Talk installed, firmware downloaded to the drive, and the motor wizard completed. Here we are on our control panel. We will start with a triggered VA interpolator move. This trigger move is commonly used to replace pneumatic or other two-position applications controlled with a 24-volt I/O. This move is more commonly known as a trapezoidal move. This move requires position, velocity, acceleration, and a deceleration. Triggered means that the system will make one move, typically out, when the trigger bit goes true, and another trapezoidal move, typically back, when the trigger bit goes false. In order to configure that trigger bit, we go to Parameters, Motion Control, Drive Configuration, I/O Definitions, X4.6 function. Here are all the functions that we can assign to pin 6, and we are going to assign it to be a trigger input. We double click on that, and then it'll tell us to stop the drive. Note that motors oriented vertically, holding parts, will drop. Yes. Now we need to configure the trigger input. We go to Trigger, Trigger Modes. Here we have a variety of modes that we can choose from for our trigger. Here we have the inhibited mode, means that it will be debounced, and the delayed mode can be used if you want to delay the trigger from happening for some period of time after the physical bit goes true. We will set the trigger bit to direct. Next, we need to tell the drive what mode it's in or what kind of a move it's going to make. So we go to Motion Control, Drive Configuration, Motion Interface, Run Mode Settings, Run Mode Selection, and here's a list of all the modes or different moves that we can make, and we will make the trigger Triggered VA Interpolator. Double click on that. Notice that there are little red L's on these parameters. These L's mean that these can be changed without needing to shut down the firmware. This means that you can adjust the parameters without stopping the motor. And now we go to Triggered VA Interpolator Settings. We have a trig fall config and a trig rise config. It means what move will be made when the trigger bit rise and falls. Click on Trig Rise config. There are 4 things you need for the move. We have the position, the velocity or max speed, acceleration, and deceleration. So for our rise position, we will be setting our position by double clicking here from 100 to 120. We will make the speed 2, and we will leave the acceleration and deceleration by default. So now we go to the control panel and reboot the drive since the firmware has stopped. Click yes. After rebooting the drive, you can see here that the motor status is switched off and the motor is not homed. In order to fix that, we go to the control panel right here and we go to the Enable Manual Override for switch on. And in order to turn on our motor, we untoggle the override value and make it true in order for our motor status to switch on. Now, we will need to home our motor. So by going to the control panel, we toggle the home on Enable Manual Override. Override value, make it true. Now our motor is properly homed. Now untoggle the override value. And now our operation is enabled. So once our motor is switched on and homed, we go to the I/O panel. The drive is ready to receive inputs on the physical I/O, which we simulate in the I/O panel. Enable the manual override. for 4.6. And then make the trigger bit from false to true. As you see here, our move has been made for the rise. And if we make our bit false, it'll go back to its fall position. Rise, fall. Now, if you would like to change the distance of the rise and fall parameters, always go to motion control and just change the parameters of the trig, rise, and fall. Let's say if we want to make the position smaller, 50, but we want to make the velocity and acceleration faster. We will set this to 5. Let's make the acceleration and deceleration to 10. Notice that we have changed our rise values, but we kept our fall values the same. So now we go to the pin 6, enable manual override, override value. That move was a lot quicker than before. We bring it back, rise, fall. This concludes this tutorial. Thank you.